Welcome to video 8 of the EKG Detective. For this month, we are going to be looking at premature junctional contractions. The EKG Detective is dedicated to helping people make the transition from using inductive logic to deductive logic. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the difference between the two, you can go back to video 1, where I spend some time talking about the differences between the two. Throughout this entire series, we are going to use two job aids. The first job aid is the EKG Detective Interpretation Checklist. The nice thing about this checklist is it really helps illustrate the mechanics of how deduction works. And if you're interested, just reach out to me at relevanceineducation.com and let me know that you would like a copy of the checklist, and I will make sure that I email one out to you so that you can use that as we go throughout this series. The second job aid that we are going to be using throughout this entire series is the EKG Detective phone app. It is available at the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. All you need to do is keyword search EKG Detective, and it will take you to where you can download a copy of the app. It's something that's not required, but it is a little bit easier to use in the aspect that it will more directly walk you through the process of deduction than the checklist will, but you by no means need to have a copy downloaded to work through this series. So the biggest question to ask is who can benefit from using EKG Detective? And the answer to that is anybody who is struggling with an ECG interpretation. The nice thing about this process is it allows you to focus on the waveforms and the things that you can see in the ECG, and you don't have to spend as much time focusing on the criteria within an ECG. Let's review the criteria for ectopic beats. All normal beats originate from the sinoatrial node or the SA node. The term ectopic means an abnormal place or position. So what that means is ectopic beats originate somewhere outside of the SA node. Premature junctional contractions originate either in the AV node, atrioventricular node, or the bundle of His, but they don't originate in the SA node. So that's what makes them ectopic. Jumping into the app, the first question that's always asked is if the rhythm is regular or irregular. When we have ectopic beats tend to create an irregularity within the rhythm. So this rhythm is irregular. So we will select irregular and then hit next to go to the next screen. The next question it's going to ask us is if the irregularity is caused by PACs, PJCs, or PVCs. So before we actually answer this question, let's go ahead and take a look at what constitutes a premature beat. So I want to talk about what actually causes or how we determine a rhythm or a beat is actually a premature complex. By definition, a premature complex is a beat that occurs early in the cardiac cycle. The way that we determine if it's coming early or late in the cardiac cycle is we want to measure the R to R intervals for our underlying rhythm. Once we have that R to R interval, then we can carry that interval across where the ectopic beat is. And if that beat occurs before the next expected beat, it's a premature beat. And if we look at our premature beat here, we know that it is coming before our next expected beat. So that's what makes this beat premature. Circling around to question 2, is the irregularity possibly caused by PACs, PJCs, or PVCs? It does appear like we do have a premature beat. So we will go to yes, hit that, and then we will select next to go to the next screen. For those of you who are using the EKG Detective checklist, let's talk about how we're going to be using it for this specific rhythm. Since we have an ectopic beat, we are going to eliminate all of the regular and irregular underlying rhythms, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the ectopic beats for this specific strip. Before we move on in the app, let's take a look at how PJCs can present themselves within the ECG. I have 3 examples here of premature junctional contractions. And the first one is where we're going to have the P wave that is in front of the QRS complex. Our middle example, the P wave is actually hidden in the QRS, and this occurs because the atria and the ventricles are depolarizing at the same time, and the ventricular depolarization is a much larger event, so the P wave gets hidden. And then the last example on the bottom is where we have a P wave that is after the QRS complex. If you notice the two examples where we have P waves, they are inverted. The reason why this occurs is because the AV junction depolarizes and the atria are depolarizing from the bottom up. These inverted P waves are frequently referred to as retrograde P waves. Depending on where the rhythm is occurring in the AV junction is going to be dependent on where the QRS complex and the P wave actually will be located. So going to question 3 in the application, are there different types of PACs, PJCs, or PVCs? And they can actually present with different looking complexes, but for our illustrations, we're only going to be looking at strips that have a single ectopic beat. So the answer to this will be no, and then we will hit next to go to the next screen. Question 4 in the app is going to ask, do the possible PACs, PJCs, or PVCs have P waves? So we'll look at 2 of our examples of ectopic beats here that do have P waves. The first one is the one that has a P wave in front of the QRS, and then the second one below that will be the P wave that is occurring after the QRS. So within the app, we are going to select yes, and then we will hit next. For those of you who are using the EKG checklist, we can get rid of premature ventricular contractions when we have P waves because PVCs do not have P waves. Since there are 3 different types of PJCs, we will be working through the app down 3 separate pathways. For this first pathway, we're going to be looking at the PJC where the P wave is in front of the QRS complex. And since it is in front of the QRS complex, we will select the P wave is in front of the QRS complex. Then we will hit next to go to the next screen. For this specific PJC, the next question that's going to be asked is what is the PR interval? And since the P wave is in front of the QRS, we will have a PR interval that we can measure. And this PR interval is measuring at 0.10 seconds. So within the app, we will select 0.11 seconds or less. Then we will hit next to go to the next screen. For those of you who are using the EKG checklist, since the PR interval is 0.11 seconds or less, we can eliminate premature atrial contractions because premature atrial contractions will have a PR that is 0.12 seconds or greater. And that leaves us with the premature junctional contraction that we have been dealing with. And within the app, that will bring us to premature junctional contractions that we've been working from as well. So looking at the PJC where the P wave is after the QRS complex, for this specific ECG, we will go to after the QRS because that's where the P wave is. We will select next to go to the next screen. Referring to our checklist, since the P wave is after the QRS complex, that means we can eliminate premature atrial contractions because PACs are going to have P waves that are in front of the QRS with a PR interval that is 0.12 seconds or greater. And that will leave us with the premature junctional contractions that we've been working from. And the app will take us again to the premature junctional contraction that we've been dealing with. The last and third possible pathway that we could be moving down is where the P wave is not visible either before or after the QRS complex and is going to be hidden in the QRS complex. So for this specific example, when we're looking at do the PACs, PJCs, or PVCs have P waves, we will select no, and then we will hit next to go to the next screen. With the P wave being absent, the next question the app's going to ask us is what is the width of the QRS complex? Measuring the width of the QRS complex in this example, we have a QRS that's about 0.08 seconds. So the QRS is 0.11 seconds or less. So we will go to the app and we will select 0.1 seconds or less, and then we will hit next to go to the next screen. If you're using the EKG Detective checklist, we can eliminate premature atrial contractions for this specific type of PJC because we don't have a PR interval to measure. And that leaves us with the premature junctional contraction that we've been dealing with. And the app will also take us to the same conclusion. All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. I just want to reiterate, if you would like to get a copy of the ECG Detective checklist, just reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get a copy of it. Also, if you have any questions about the EKG Detective phone app, you can reach out to me at relevanceineducation.com, and I would be more than happy to try to answer any questions or get you the resources that you need. And if you haven't done so, I would really appreciate if you would subscribe and like this video, because it definitely would help out as I'm trying to get this channel up and running. And I appreciate you for sitting through this video. And just remember that it is always better to practice as a clinician rather than a technician. See you next month.